The recorder clicked once before the detective began speaking. For the record, today's interview concerns the attempted homicide that took place on September 17th in the underground parking garage beneath Greystone Plaza, MS. Marlowe, are you physically able to continue? I looked at the clear plastic bottle of water sitting on the table. My right hand reached for it automatically. The skin along my wrist tightened, the scars pulling painfully as my fingers wrapped around the bottle. 3 surgeries later, even simple movements reminded me what fire could do. I can continue. Take your time. He slid a photograph across the table, my SUV or what remained of it. The entire front half had collapsed inward, the roof had buckled from the heat. The driver's seat was nothing more than blackened springs surrounded by ash. Anyone looking at that picture would reach the same conclusion. Nobody could have survived inside. For months, newspapers called it a miracle. I never liked that word. Miracles don't smell like burning flesh. Miracles don't wake up screaming because they still hear metal twisting around them. The detective waited. When you're ready, tell me about that morning. I closed my eyes, not because I wanted to remember, because forgetting had become impossible. It started at 6:00 a.m., not with the fire, with a voicemail. My mother's voice filled the speaker. I've made cinnamon rolls. Stop by before work if you can. Nadine and Asher are coming too. Anyone listening would hear nothing unusual, a warm invitation, a mother wanting breakfast with her daughters. If I had known it would be the last time I'd ever willingly walk into her kitchen, I would have deleted that message without listening to the end. Instead, I smiled. I even called her back. I'll be there in 40 minutes, she sounded delighted. Drive safely, sweetheart, sweetheart. That word still makes me nauseous because by then she already knew someone had hidden a can of industrial accelerant in my vehicle. She already knew someone had disabled the emergency door release. She already knew I wasn't supposed to come home that evening. Back then, I knew none of it. I arrived at my parents' house carrying a cardboard tray with 4 expensive coffees balanced against my hip. Dad opened the front door before I knocked. There she is. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. He hugged me anyway. He always did exactly what Mom expected. The kitchen looked exactly as it had since childhood. Blue curtains, oak cabinets, the old ceramic rooster sitting beside the stove. Even the clock on the wall still ran 3 minutes fast because Mom claimed punctual people succeeded in life. Nadine sat at the island scrolling through her phone. Asher got promoted again. I asked after noticing the celebration balloons tied to a dining chair. She looked up with a smile that never touched her eyes. He deserves it, so do you, she laughed softly. I think today's going to be the biggest day of his career. Something about the way she said it made me pause. What happens today? Mom answered before Nadine could. Oh, sweetheart, not everything revolves around your company. Everyone laughed, even Dad. I laughed too. Now I know they weren't laughing at the joke. They were laughing because I had unknowingly asked the exact right question. What happens today? Everything. Breakfast felt strangely rushed. Mom kept insisting I eat more. Dad barely touched his food. Asher arrived 20 minutes late wearing the same navy suit he'd worn to every quarterly board meeting for years. He looked nervous, not guilty, excited, like someone waiting for fireworks. He hugged me first. Big presentation today. I know, you finally ready to announce the Chicago expansion? Assuming the board approves, it will. He answered much too quickly. Then he looked toward Mom. It lasted less than a second. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did, not because it looked suspicious, because it looked rehearsed. They'd shared that glance before, many times. I simply hadn't understood its meaning. After breakfast, Mom packed leftovers into a paper bag. You work too hard, you'll forget to eat. She kissed my cheek. I love you. Those words replayed in my head while I lay in intensive care with tubes down my throat, because less than 3 hours after saying them, she watched me burn. The detective interrupted gently. You drove straight to the office, no? I stopped for fuel, he nodded. Security footage confirms that. I also stopped at Whitman's Coffee. You always did, every Tuesday. He wrote something in his notebook. Routine. The word looked harmless written in blue ink. Routine is exactly what killers love because routines make victims predictable. I parked beneath Greystone Plaza at 847 Level B3 Space 214, the same place I parked almost every morning. I grabbed my laptop bag, then my phone rang. It was our legal department. I stayed inside the SUV to answer. The conversation lasted almost 6 minutes. When I finally reached for the door handle, it wouldn't open. At first I thought the child's safety lock had somehow engaged. I tried again, nothing. I hit the unlock button. Nothing, I frowned. That was the exact moment I noticed a faint chemical smell drifting through the air vents. Not gasoline, something sweeter. Something heavier. Then a tiny thread of gray smoke curled out from beneath the steering column. I remember staring at it, trying to convince myself I was imagining it until another strand appeared and another. Then the first orange flame flickered beneath the dashboard. The detective stopped writing. When did you realize someone had done this intentionally? I looked directly at him. 30 seconds later. Why? Because I wasn't alone. He leaned forward. What did you see? I swallowed. Through the windshield, standing calmly beside a concrete pillar, my younger sister was watching my car fill with smoke. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't calling for help. She was smiling, and she had already started recording me with her phone. Nadine didn't move. She stood there with one hand wrapped around her phone, holding it upright as if she were filming a birthday surprise instead of watching her older sister struggle inside a smoke-filled vehicle. At first, I still believed there had to be some explanation. Maybe she was frozen in shock. Maybe she was about to run for help. Maybe. Then she smiled. Not a nervous smile, not an uncertain one, a smile of satisfaction. She slowly walked toward the driver's side until only the glass separated us. I pounded both fists against the window. Nadine, the door won't open. She tilted her head. I know. 3 words, spoken so casually that for a heartbeat the smoke wasn't the thing stealing my breath. You what? I said. I know. The flames beneath the dashboard grew brighter, licking around the pedals. I kicked at the door. Nothing. I slammed my shoulder into the door again. Still nothing. The lock didn't seem broken. It felt reinforced, as if someone had made sure it could never be opened. Nadine. She glanced around the nearly empty parking level before stepping even closer. You always hated parking underground. I stared at her. Remember, you used to say that if there was ever an emergency, there was only one way out. My stomach tightened. She remembered that conversation. We'd had it years ago while shopping downtown. It hadn't been random. She had remembered. She had planned for this. Unlock it. I can't. You have the keys. She gave a faint smile. There aren't any keys. My heart pounded. Modern vehicles could be disabled electronically. Asher would know that. As chief financial officer, he wasn't an engineer, but he'd insisted on overseeing every security upgrade the company purchased, including the fleet management software. He'd once bragged about how easily connected vehicles could be monitored remotely. Back then I'd laughed. Now every word came rushing back. The engine suddenly coughed. The dashboard lights went dark. The electronic locks clicked one last time, followed by complete silence. The vehicle had been shut down remotely. I grabbed my phone. The screen was completely black, dead. It had been working only minutes earlier while I was speaking with legal. Someone had disabled that too. Nadine looked almost bored. You know what's funny? I couldn't answer through the coughing. You always thought success made you untouchable. Another burst of heat erupted beneath the steering column. Melted plastic began dripping onto the floor. It doesn't. I slammed both hands against the horn. Nothing, no sound. The wiring had been cut. I looked around desperately. The parking garage seemed deserted. Office employees usually started arriving around 9 o'clock. It wasn't even 8:55 yet. The level was nearly empty. Another coincidence that suddenly didn't feel like one. Nadine sighed dramatically. I honestly hoped this would be quicker. Then another pair of footsteps echoed across the concrete. I looked past her, my mother. She carried her leather handbag over one shoulder, walking with the same calm confidence she always had after leaving church on Sundays. No panic, no alarm, no urgency. She stopped beside Nadine and looked directly at me through the windshield. For several long seconds, she said nothing. Then she calmly studied the growing flames as if she were watching a fireplace. I told you the timing would be perfect, she said quietly. Nadine nodded. It is. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, she looked at me without a trace of emotion. No fear, no love. Nothing, please. She adjusted the sleeve of her coat before speaking. You've always been dramatic, Vivian. My chest tightened. The car's on fire, I can see that. Help me. She glanced at Nadine. Has anyone come? Not yet. Mom nodded with satisfaction. Good, good. The word echoed inside my head. She thought this was good. I pounded on the glass again. Mom, please. She finally stepped closer. For one impossible second, hope returned. Maybe this had all been a misunderstanding. Maybe she was about to unlock the door. Maybe. Instead, she rested her fingertips lightly against the hot glass. You really should have learned that control comes with a price. What? You controlled everything, our family's money, the company, the house. Every decision. I built the company. You certainly enjoy reminding people. Her voice stayed perfectly calm. And today, she said, glancing toward the office tower visible through the garage entrance, that finally changes. A cold realization spread through me. Asher, Mom smiled. He should be walking into the boardroom about now. No, he has every document he needs. He doesn't have authorization. He does, my mind raced, the emergency succession file. The sealed packet my attorney had insisted we prepare years earlier in case I died unexpectedly before restructuring ownership. Only 3 people knew it existed. Me, my attorney. Asher, because he'd handled the financial disclosures. I suddenly understood why he'd insisted on reviewing the corporate governance documents months earlier. Why he'd volunteered to organize the executive records, why he'd repeatedly asked if I'd updated my will. It hadn't been curiosity, it had been preparation. You planned this, Nadine laughed softly. It actually took longer than we expected. Mom looked almost proud. Some plans are worth waiting for. I felt sick. How long? Weeks, months, years, every family dinner, every holiday. Every hug, every smile, had all of it been part of the plan. You'll never get away with this. Mom shrugged. People die in electrical fires every day. It wasn't electrical. It will look that way. She sounded so certain that my blood ran cold. Asher had arranged everything, the reports. The insurance, the maintenance records, the evidence. He'd thought through every detail except a faint metallic banging echoed somewhere behind them. Someone was shouting. The 3 of us turned at the same time. A maintenance worker in an orange safety vest had stepped off a service elevator nearly 100 feet away. He hadn't noticed us yet. He was pushing a heavy equipment cart toward another corridor. My mother reacted instantly. Leave, Nadine hesitated. What if, leave? Neither of them argued. They turned and walked briskly toward the stairwell, not running, not panicking, just disappearing before anyone could connect them to the burning vehicle. I watched them go. Neither of them looked back even once. Smoke filled the cabin until the world beyond the windshield blurred into shifting shadows. The maintenance worker finally noticed the flames. His cart tipped over with a loud crash. Oh my God, he dropped everything and sprinted toward me. He yanked on the driver's door. Nothing, he tried again. It's jammed, I pounded the window desperately. He looked around wildly before grabbing a fire extinguisher from the nearest pillar. He smashed it against the side window. The glass spiderwebbed but didn't break. Again, still nothing. The SUV had been fitted with reinforced security glass after a series of executive carjackings the previous year. The same safety feature I'd approved was now trapping me inside. The man stepped back, breathing hard, then he did something I never expected. He grabbed the heavy steel equipment cart he'd abandoned, aimed it straight at my SUV and started running. The cart picked up speed, faster. It slammed into the driver's side with a deafening crash. Something exploded beneath the hood. The blast threw the maintenance worker backward. The steel cart bounced away, one wheel spinning wildly before collapsing onto its side. For a moment, everything disappeared behind thick black smoke, then cold air rushed into the cabin. The impact hadn't opened the driver's door. Instead, it had buckled the rear passenger door just enough to create a narrow opening. Move, the maintenance worker shouted. Get to the back. Every breath felt like swallowing burning sand. I tore off my blazer, wrapped it around my hand, and dragged myself across the center console. The seats were already on fire. Molten plastic clung to my palms, sending waves of pain through my hands. I barely reached the back seat when another explosion rocked the SUV. The rear window shattered outward. The maintenance worker shoved his arm through the opening. Take my hand, I reached, missed, reached again. This time our fingers locked. He pulled with everything he had. Glass sliced through my clothes. Pain shot across my shoulders. Then suddenly, I was outside. We both crashed onto the concrete just as flames burst through the roof of the SUV. The heat rolled over us like a giant wave. Someone was shouting. Another person appeared, then another. Within seconds, the quiet parking level erupted into chaos. Call 911, get another extinguisher. She's alive. I tried to sit up. The maintenance worker gently pushed me back down. Don't move. The word barely escaped. My sister, he leaned closer. What? My mother. Everything sounded distant. The edges of my vision darkened. I pointed weakly toward the stairwell. Before I could finish, darkness swallowed everything. When I opened my eyes again, bright lights drifted above me. A hospital ceiling, voices, machines, an oxygen mask covered my face. A nurse noticed my eyes opening. Don't try to talk. My throat burned too badly to argue. A doctor stepped beside the bed. You've been unconscious for almost 30 hours. 30 hours. the words barely registered, then the memories came flooding back, the parking garage, the fire, Nadine, my mother. Asher, the doctor's expression softened. You're safe, safe. Nothing about my life felt safe anymore. The next morning, Detective Owen Mercer visited my hospital room. He asked if anyone had threatened me before the fire. Yes, my sister, my mother, my brother-in-law. When he mentioned my brother-in-law, the CFO, I confirmed it. Then he handed me a newspaper. The headline announced Greystone Logistics interim leadership after the CEO's tragic accident. Asher was already standing at the podium wearing my company's lapel pin, acting as if I were dead. My mother and sister stood beside him, pretending to grieve. I laughed bitterly. They hadn't just tried to kill me, they had already replaced me. The detective asked if I had any proof. Then I remembered the encrypted executive archive, created years earlier by our cybersecurity consultant, Elias Rowan. No one in my family knew it existed. Soon, Elias arrived at the hospital. He revealed that only hours after my accident, someone, almost certainly Asher, had tried repeatedly to access the archive. Every failed login, every action, and every attempt to erase the records had been captured. Then Elias showed security footage. It revealed Asher tampering with my SUV before the explosion and later disabling the parking garage cameras. A forgotten backup camera had recorded everything. Another video showed Asher and Nadine discussing the fire inside my office. Detective Mercer immediately requested arrest warrants. Elias also confirmed that Asher had only temporary authority. As long as I was alive, Greystone Logistics still belonged to me. Before sunrise, police arrested Asher at company headquarters. Nadine was caught preparing to flee the country, and my mother was arrested after investigators found documents discussing how my assets would be divided after my death. The evidence led to convictions for conspiracy, attempted murder, arson, fraud, and related financial crimes. Recovery took much longer than the trial. My burns healed slowly and the nightmares lasted for months. The maintenance worker, Grant Holloway, whose quick actions saved my life, later visited me. To honor him, Greystone created an Employee Emergency Response Scholarship in his name. When my doctors cleared me, I returned as CEO. My first decision was to strengthen executive oversight and security so no one could ever exploit a tragedy like this again. A year later, I stood at a quiet overlook, looking at the scars on my hands. I realized they weren't reminders of what my family had taken from me, they were proof that they had failed. I lost the people I thought were my family, but I kept my integrity, my company, and my life. That was the one thing they never expected me to reclaim.